Om. We continue from where we left off. Reality cannot be objectified. As we said, both of these forms of knowledge are centered upon the objective world. There are objects in the world, an objective reality, for which we require perception and inference. But there is another reality which cannot be objectified by sense organs, nor is it indirect and away from you. That reality is what we call the self. Self means you. You are not pratyaksha. You cannot perceive yourself because you are the very perceiver. Nor can you be inferred because inference requires perception as its basis. If you cannot perceive yourself, you cannot infer about yourself also. The self can never become an object of perception. You can perceive only what you can objectify with the senses. For example, my organ of hearing can objectify sound, so I can perceive that. Eyes can objectify colors and forms, so I can perceive them. But they can never objectify the objectifier. When we define truth, which we call satya, we say abadhitam satyam. Truth is that which cannot be negated. Everything that you can perceive or infer can be negated. The one who negates cannot be negated, however, because you require yourself in order to negate something. There is a famous statement in the Upanishad in which the sage Yajnavalkya says to his wife Maitreyi, Vijnataram are kena vijaniyat. By what means can you know the knower? He also says, Na drishtehe drashtaram pashyeha. You cannot see the seer. This is where we require the unfoldment of the scriptures by the teacher. Subtopic: the meaning of Aparokshanubhuti. The self, therefore, falls into a different category. The self is neither pratyaksha, perceptible, nor paroksha, inferable. So we have another word here, which is aparoksha. Aparoksha means that which is not paroksha. Paroksha refers to that which is beyond the range of perception. In doing so, it also presumes something that is both different from me and also remote. But there is something that is not in front of me and is also not remote. Nobody thinks about that, and this is what Vedanta addresses. Science always talks about pratyaksha and paroksha, what is evident and what is not evident, whereas Vedanta talks about aparoksha. Pratyaksha is that which can be objectified. The self cannot be objectified, so it cannot be pratyaksha. Paroksha is that which is remote, away from me. The self is not away from me because it is me, and therefore it also cannot be paroksha. The self being what it is, it can be neither pratyaksha nor paroksha. Aparoksha therefore means my own self. The terms pratyaksha and paroksha both refer to what can be objectified, whereas aparoksha refers to the self, the subject. Thus, we now come to the title of this work, which is Aparokshanubhuti. The title is a compound made of the words aparoksha and anubhuti. Anubhuti generally means experience. The experience of what is aparoksha is therefore called Aparokshanubhuti. If paroksha is the self, then experience of the self is called Aparokshanubhuti. The term Aparokshanubhuti also has a problem. In fact, any term you use will create some difficulty because all terms, and in fact the whole language, are developed based upon our day-to-day experiences. All experiences lie within the realm of duality. in which the experiencer is different from what is experienced. Thus, there is no word that can deal with something that transcends this duality. Yet, there is indeed something that does not fall into either of these two categories of experienced and experiencer. You cannot call the self experienced because what is experienced is normally different from the self. You cannot call the self as an experiencer because the experiencer is also a role that the self takes. The word knowledge is also generally understood to involve duality. Knowledge involves the duality between the knower and the known. Knowledge cannot exist without a knower. So knowledge presupposes the knower. Who is the knower? The knower is the locus or agent of the act of knowing as expressed by the suffix er, just as driver is the locus of the act of driving and a teacher is the locus of the act of teaching. In knowing, the knower knows something that is different from him. All these words are used in our day to day language and therefore always involve duality. Every word is known in reference to some other word. Everything is known in reference to something else. There is nothing absolute. Good is with reference to bad, happiness is with reference to unhappiness, and so on. There is always some pratyogi counterpart to every word or concept. Subtopic: Language and mind deal only with the relative. But what about something that doesn't have a pratyogi? Our language cannot deal with that, and therefore our mind doesn't deal with that. It deals only with relative things. Everything that we know or experience is relative to something else. It exists because of something else. A pot requires clay for it to exist, for example, and clay requires earth for it to exist. Earth requires atoms, then molecules, and then subatomic particles. Whatever we know is always because of something else. It derives its existence from something. It shines because of something. But we have no word for that which exists and shines on its own because we never come across that. The limitation of words. Therefore, no matter what word we use, ultimately we have to give up its conventional or generally understood meaning. This generally understood meaning is called Vachyartha in Sanskrit. We have to rise above that, which is why no word is sufficient to describe the self. Knowledge is a good word, of course. Self knowledge, self realization, experience of self, etc. People use different words to try to grapple with this. None of these words apply in a primary sense. However, because realization also involves a realizer and something that is realized. Experiencing also involves experiencer and experienced, and knowing also involves knower and known. Each word has a contribution to make. The word knowledge contributes something, as do the words experience and realization. If you use a million words, you may perhaps come to some real understanding. That is why people have preference for different words. Puja Swamiji always used the word knowledge. He never liked the words experience and realization because there is a connotation that experiencing something always involves some feeling, some duality. Basically, Puja Swamiji's point was that having an experience does not mean that you understand what you are experiencing. Understanding what you are experiencing is important. Experience generally involves some kind of sensation or feeling, whereas knowledge involves understanding. Here you require both experience and knowledge or understanding of what you experience. In that sense, we can understand Aparokshanubhuti as being the immediate or direct perception or understanding of the self. The next topic is knowledge of the self is immediate, which we'll take in the next session.